Disclaimer for this week's episode. We will be getting into part of our story which encompasses infidelity. If this is a subject you find triggering or wish to avoid, please feel free to skip this episode. Hey y'all, welcome back to the More Than Able podcast.
More Than Able podcast.
What episode number is this?
This is 4.
4.
Episode.
Wow.
That was
already.
Wow, that was really quick.
That was really
We
fast.
said we were going to do one a week, and now we're at 4.
4. That's crazy.
So last week, we talked a little bit more about our story.
Yeah.
And we kind of left you hanging on a cliffhanger there. Said that we had turned into a big fight.
Yeah.
And so just a little bit of a recap. Heather had just found some inappropriate photos in one of my emails, or in my email, in one of my trash folders, of one of the women that I had been talking to.
Yeah. And I'll say if this is the first podcast episode you're listening to, definitely go back and watch the others,
absolutely.
Because you're going to be lost. You're going to have no clue what we're talking about if you don't do that. And it would be a lot for us to try to recap everything from the previous episode.
Yeah, because our last episode was a little bit longer.
We're not a TV show. We don't go last time on the podcast.
We don't have a highlight reel.
We don't have a recap, an episode recap. So, yeah, we're basically on timeline wise, we're July 2013. I will recap just a little bit and say I have been suspicious for the last several months. So I had been scouring through text messages, emails, anything that I could, get my hands on to, figure out why I was feeling suspicious. Yeah. And there was one Sunday morning, I'm pretty sure we were probably getting ready to go to church.
Probably.
And I think Terry was in the shower, and like I had been doing for months, I was scouring through everything, and I had picked up his iPad and gotten to his email and didn't find anything in the inbox. So I went to his trash folder and was just scrolling, and I seen some things in there where he had sent himself something, like it was like an email from himself. And I almost just scrolled right past it because I was like, well, that doesn't matter. It's just something he sent himself. But there was just like a little nudge inside me that was like, click on that. You got to click on that. And so I clicked on it, and it was a picture of a girl. How much do I say here?
Say whatever you want to say. Just like we said from the first episode, and like Heather just said, if you haven't listened to our other episodes, we're going to be very vulnerable. There's a lot of our story that I wouldn't say is PG-13, but there's a lot of our story that may be inappropriate for children. Definitely inappropriate for children to listen to.
Yeah. It's just more mature conversations.
Yes, exactly.
So I found these couple of emails that he had sent himself, and I think the gist of it was he had sent them from his phone to his email so he could see it on a bigger screen.
Yeah.
And it was, I very vividly remember the pictures. There was a girl laying on a float, like in a lake or a creek or something, and you couldn't see everything on the top, but there was not much left to the imagination. Yeah. And pictures that were clearly inappropriate.
Exactly. And
I didn't know who this person was, and it was the same girl in both pictures. And I waited for Terry to come out of the shower and literally shoved the iPad in his face and was like, "What's this?" And I told him, I won't say it exactly how I said it, but I told him to pack his stuff and get out. And so, he went to start packing a bag, and I went in there and we started arguing about, I don't even know everything we argued about. I mean, it's probably a lot of stuff that in the big scheme of things doesn't even matter. I think there was some argument about the way, I don't do anything around the house during the day.
Yeah, I'm sure that was brought up.
It was just a big blow up. And the one thing I do remember about it is as he was taking his bag and walking towards the front door, he told me that he was done with women and he was done with me. And he walked out, and I was like, that's it. Like, my marriage is over. I had, 2 small kids. I'm like, I don't even have a job. Like, what am I supposed to do now? Yeah. Like, it was a really, really dark day.
And we had been living in some very dark times. Our marriage had been struggling so much so that, of course, our sex life was struggling as well. And let me just say this, like we talked about in the last episode, the pornography will lead you longing for more. And so the whole sending an email to myself to get a bigger picture again was because my brain was longing for more. But also the physical affairs was once in each situation. So there was one physical interaction with each of these individuals as far as it being actual sex. But mine and Heather's relationship was struggling. Of course, I was looking at porn all the time. And so there was this longing for more. And somewhere along the roads, I don't remember how it came about or who brought it up. It may have even been me that brought it up, but we were having conversations about bringing other people into our marriage, about
and I think
inviting other
it's
people
because
to have sex with us.
During that time, we were both struggling with that porn addiction. And so we both had that whole fantasy world going separately from one another. And because things weren't really going well in the bedroom for us, and we were struggling in that area, I think we both thought maybe we bring another person in.
Yeah.
That's totally something you would see on porn.
Yeah.
Is a threesome.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm so thankful that God protected us from actually doing that, because that would have been a disaster. I don't think that that's something our marriage could have come back from. That would have been really bad.
Well, and there's no telling what kind of things we could have or possibly would have caught.
Yeah.
If something like that had happened. So, I mean, things were just very, very dark. And so coming out of that day when we got into that fight, I had packed a bag, and I was going to stay with my brother-in-law. And I don't remember a lot about that day. I do remember my father was in the hospital. He had just had a heart attack. And I think we ended up talking later that evening and decided...
You had called me because you were going to go see your dad in the hospital, and you wanted to take the kids to see him.
And so, of course, I come and got the kids, and I don't even know how long we were at the hospital to see my dad, but eventually I come back to the house, and she had agreed to let me come in, and we talked. And I don't think I was ever actually out of the house.
No, you never stayed a night. You never stayed a whole night out of the house.
I had.
Because I agreed to let you stay on the couch.
Yeah.
I think that was the agreement. I said, you can stay here, but you gotta stay on the couch. Like, we're not gonna sleep in the same bed. And that first week was we spent a lot of time. I spent a lot of time asking questions and stuff, and Terry spent a lot of time dodging questions and lying and not telling me about things.
Yeah, because she still didn't know at that point the full extent of everything.
I thought it was just pictures.
You thought it was just photos.
Yeah, and that was devastating enough. Like, thinking, you had been inappropriately messaging someone like that, and he had me convinced that it was just this girl had just begged him to let her send him pictures, and so he finally just gave in and let her send him some pictures. And so I had a lot of questions about that, and my thought was like, okay, like, we can get through this. Like, that's all it was. Like, that's really bad, but we can get through it. And I think it was exactly a week later. It was that next weekend. We actually went to help a friend. I think you were helping her fix her car or something, and we had all of us had went. And so I was sitting in your truck waiting for you to get done helping her fix her car, and you had an old phone in there. I think it was like an old flip phone, and it was I remember weird details. I don't even know if you remember this, where the phone came from. Like, you had went to Indiana to visit family, and you had dropped your phone in a hot tub or something, and
I do remember
I think
that.
It was your cousin had this extra phone that he gave you.
I went up for my grandmother's funeral.
Yeah. And so he had this extra phone. Well, you had ended up getting a new phone, and so you didn't need that extra phone, but it was still sitting in your truck console. And so I picked it up, and I was like, there's no way there's going to be anything in this phone. Like, he would have wiped it all off, right? But I was going to look through it anyways. And so I turned it on and looked through it and found messages from some other girl, and they were messages that seemed like you were in a relationship with her.
Yeah.
Like she was asking you if you wanted her to bring you breakfast and stuff. And
Yeah.
I was just like, who is this? What is this? What's happening? And so I think I put the phone back, and I didn't even tell you that I had found anything on it at first.
No, you didn't.
And we had got back home, and I think I waited for the right time, and I basically just questioned you. I was like, how many have there been? And I think at first you still tried to lie to me, and then I told you what I had found on your phone, and then you came clean.
Yeah.
And I think at that point you realized, crap, like I'm caught.
Well, and like if this was going to work, like at that point I figured it's probably over. Like, and if it's not, the only way it's going to work is if she knows this stuff.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we sat, I remember like you were sitting in the chair and I was sitting in the floor, and I remember just laying it out and just being a blubbering mess.
Yeah.
And asking or telling you I was sorry and like feeling just scum of the earth, like down on my feet, my face and my hands, down at her feet.
Yeah, I remember you
like,
literally holding on to my feet, like
feeling like that was the only thing I was allowed to touch, and just laying it all out. And there was a whole lot. The second woman that I had, I would say, like you said, more of a relationship with, it was definitely a whole lot more interaction. There was still just the one sexual encounter, but we were talking all the time. And like you said, she would bring me breakfast and things of the sort like that, and it was definitely more of an emotional affair. Feeling, like I said in this last episode we just talked about, like feeling those voids in my life where I was needing the validation, feeling like I was worth something to somebody. And so,
well, and I had found out a little bit after everything came out that you had said I love you to her once. And I remember that to me was more devastating than finding out you had sex with anyone, because I felt like at that moment I was like, so did he really love her? Does he love her? Because that, like, love doesn't just disappear. And so then I'm like, we're dealing with a whole other thing. He said I love you to someone that's not me. And what does that mean? Like, does that mean that he's still does he miss her? Is he still longing for her affection? And is he missing that contact and that conversation and stuff? And like, there was a whole lot more hurt that came just from knowing that part. And I remember having that conversation with you, and I remember you telling me that you didn't love her, and that you really were just telling her that to see what she would say back. And none of that made me feel any better about it, because words are said and you can't take those back. And that was just something that I had to work through. But that one was hard to deal with, and I ended up actually having conversations with this woman. That was a whole other thing.
That was weird. Well, and I remember, like, we had already started we were talking to a counselor.
Yeah, our church, we had kind of gone to a church a little bit, and this church, I think they paid for like 6 sessions or something, but it was all done via Skype. And I think the counselor wasn't even in the country.
She wasn't.
She
was in South Africa or something on missions.
It was just kind of weird, and it was like a couples counseling type thing, and which I think can be really beneficial. But I feel like when something like this happens, it's more beneficial in the beginning for you to have your own separate counseling.
Absolutely.
Because, like, for me, I was experiencing something completely different than what Terry was experiencing.
Yeah.
We've talked about this concept before of, like, when everything came out, that he was, like, up here on a higher level than I was, because he's now, the weight has been lifted off of his shoulders. He's not carrying all these secrets anymore. He found out that his wife actually is going to stay with him and try to work on things.
And that you had actually said that you would, because I remember when I was at your feet just begging pretty much begging for you to let me stay. And the words that you said was, I'm not going to make you any promises, but I will try.
Yeah.
And so for me, that was like everything that I had done that you were still willing to even just try. And so, yeah, like you said, it put me at a different level emotionally. It almost gave me like this pick me up.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, I had gotten all this off my chest. I wasn't carrying this stuff anymore. Because I don't want to say it wasn't good for me to be going through those things. But there was things that it was doing for me that was making me feel good. But at the same time, it was debilitating to me. It was breaking me down.
Yeah. Well, because you had all these secrets and lies on top of lies, and that all that does is wear you down.
Exactly.
I mean, it's mentally.
Well, and when you have a lie, you got to try to remember another lie and that lie on top of that lie, and there's just the whole story of trying to remember.
And so when everything came out, you're kind of up here, not on a high, but you're up here, further up than I was.
Definitely a different level.
Yeah, on a different level. And so, but my whole world had just been shattered. Everything that I thought I knew was a lie. It was destroyed. Like, it was the worst. And so that's where I started. And so for us to go to counseling together right from the get-go was really hard to do because we were not struggling with the same things.
No.
Like, we were in the same marriage and we had the one issue of infidelity, but we were not dealing with the same things.
No.
And so if we would have had the resources at the time to go through individual counseling, that probably would have been so huge and beneficial for us.
Yeah.
Because I had, trauma, hurt, like all of these things to process through. But you had a whole other host of things of shame and guilt and regret and why did I do these
self-hatred.
things? Yeah. So a whole other set of issues to process through, and you can't process through both of those things together in a session.
Absolutely not.
And I think when you do the individual counseling and then you work through those things, then you can come together and figure out now how do we communicate better? How do we make this work a little bit better?
Well, and I know we both were in counseling, 2 years ago or a year and a half ago?
Yeah.
Or I think maybe you were a year and a half ago. I think I was a little over 2 years ago. And I've been to counseling on myself as an individual, I think on 3 separate occasions for probably 6 months at a time. And through all of those times, I was learning more and more about myself. It was kind of crazy because I remember going through what they called EMDR, which there's a couple of different ways they can do it. Well, I won't get into that, but what it was allowing me to do was there was things that had happened in my past and things that had happened to me as a child that my brain had suppressed, and I didn't realize it. There was things I had actually forgotten about that were impacting me at my current state during my affairs. And a lot of like I said in the last episode, a lot of what led to the emotional affairs and the physical affairs was that longing for that validation, feeling wanted, feeling desired, feeling like I was worth something. And a lot of that stems from my childhood. And I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
And that looking for affection.
Yeah. And you would have never been able to realize that without counseling. No. That's not something that would just come up
no,
in your
absolutely
mind.
Not. And I remember going through counseling, and I will say this, counseling is a tool. It can be a huge benefit if you're willing to put in the time and the work. You can't just go and expect it's going to be this quick fix, snap your fingers, oh, you're good, see you later.
Yeah.
It was really freaking hard, like really hard.
Well, you have to be willing to be completely open and vulnerable and like not hold things back because you're trying to get some desired answer from your counselor or something, or trying to put on a face like you're better. You're not as damaged as what you actually are or something.
Yeah,
and
because actually I come out of counseling feeling more damaged.
Yeah.
I remember having nightmares about the things that I had ended up remembering and waking up in the middle of the night crying and feeling like the things that I was remembering had just happened.
Yeah.
And so counseling is a huge tool, but it is hard.
Yeah.
But through that, it made me realize so much about myself and what caused my affairs, parts of what caused my affairs, parts of what helped me make the decisions that I did.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, counseling is an absolute.
Well, and you learning those things in counseling ended up helping me, because a huge question I always had was why?
Yeah.
Just why?
Yeah.
And I think almost every time I would ask that, your answer would be, I don't know. Like, you had some speculations here and there, but ultimately you're like, I really just don't know. And so through going to counseling and learning these things, you were able to definitively say, this is why.
Yeah.
And it went back to his childhood, and you would never think that something that happened in your marriage could be because of something that happened in your childhood. Like, in my brain, those two things were not related. Childhood and marriage, completely separate times of your life. Like, how can they be related?
Yeah.
But they were completely intertwined.
Mm-hmm.
And so learning that, like, not only was I able to finally have an answer as to why you did the things that you did, but it gave me assurance that it's not going to happen again. Because when the answer from you was, I don't know, all that left in me was an uneasy feeling of, well, if he doesn't know why it happened, how can I be assured that it's not going to happen again? You know, because if you can't tell me the reason why this thing happened, how can you prevent it from happening again? And so when you learned what you learned in counseling, it gave me that assurance to know, okay, well, he's working through these things. Eventually it was, you know, you worked through those things.
That's what I was gonna say.
And so that gave me the assurance that those things are no longer things you struggle with.
No.
You no longer have that like unquenchable desire for this validation that you can't get. And so because you worked through those things in counseling, I know that it's not going to happen again.
Well, and as an individual, what the world tells us will fill us are not the things that will fill us.
Yeah.
You know, and so the world was telling me pornography. The world was telling me relationships with other women. The world was telling me sex. Mm-hmm. And none of those things will fill your emotional desires. None of those things will fill your longing for validation or feeling wanted or feeling beautiful or handsome. All those things can only come from God.
Mm-hmm.
And it was when I started seeking God and he was the one that was filling me, was when I actually felt full.
Yeah.
And that's something that me and Heather have talked about many times, is I cannot make Heather happy, and I'm sorry, I said that wrong. I cannot be Heather's source of happiness, and she cannot be my source of happiness. Now, that's not to say that we can't make each other happy or that we can't make each other feel loved or desired, but my true source of happiness and joy has to come from God.
Yeah.
And when it does, and it is, then everything that Heather can give me is just on top.
Yeah.
It's just the icing on the cake, if you'd say, and vice versa. And when I finally started seeking after God in my life the way I should have been all those years, was when things turned around for me. Mm-hmm. And that was when things turned around for you. Mm-hmm. Because it wasn't just a matter of us going to counseling.
No, like counseling is a great tool, but the amount of counseling that we've had over the years, I mean,
there was times we thought like, this is just getting worse. Counseling's making things worse. This is not helping anything. Why are we doing this? Things are getting worse between us.
There's been more seasons not in counseling than seasons in counseling. And, you know, those seasons of counseling are super necessary, but there's a lot of hard work that has to be done outside of counseling.
Exactly.
And, you know, I would say, you know, the majority of the work is done outside of counseling. I mean, counseling sessions are like 45 minutes long. Yeah. And, you know, and then you got to take what you got out of counseling and go apply it in real life. Exactly. Talk to your spouse about it. Exactly. Like that was early last year. I went back to counseling because I had been in counseling many times and had kind of talked about Terry's affairs, but not really in any great detail. And I never really got much out of it. I was always trying to, I think, put on a good face.
Yeah.
And I think there was still some like shame attached to me with like not wanting so many people to know everything that we've walked through, like it was somehow shameful on me. And but I was really struggling through a lot of stuff, and it actually came out. I think we were arguing about something once early last year or sometime, and a lot of these old feelings started coming to the surface about your affairs, and it caught me off guard because I was like, it's been so long ago, like what, where is this coming from? And I think you had told me that I needed to go back to counseling, and so I was like, I guess I do. And what I realized was, we had worked through a lot of stuff in our marriage, and like our marriage was in a better place, but I never dealt with the damage
trauma
inside of me, like the emotional damage that came along with the trauma of, and some people might think that trauma seems like a very strong word for something like this. A lot of people equate trauma to witnessing somebody, being killed, or war, gruesome things like that. But your brain can't differentiate trauma.
Trauma is trauma.
And so when something devastating happens like this, your brain recognizes it as trauma.
Exactly.
And so I had to make this decision to go back to counseling and give it my all. And I just went into it and I was like, okay, I'm going to do this for real this time.
Yeah.
I'm not going to hold anything back. I'm going to lay it all out there because I can't keep living with this. Like it was just, I guess, eating me up and was making me a miserable person to be around. I think that my family didn't like being around me all that much. I didn't want to be around me. And, like I actually had like I guess you call it a mental breakdown one day.
You had a mental breakdown.
And, I was in a really bad place one day. I think it was on a Sunday. And because I want to say we had come home after church, and I was just in a really bad mood, was super irritable. And I really just wanted to go lay down and get away from everybody. But I knew I needed to cook lunch for everybody. And so I was cooking lunch. And I think I had snapped at Eden or something, and she had went off in her room, and Terry was trying to fix things. He's a fixer.
Yeah.
If you didn't know this about him, as is, I think, every man on the planet. But he was trying to fix it, and he had Eden come back in there and was trying to get us to talk, and I was just not in the right headspace for that. And, it was my fault for not communicating where I was at to him, which I think I did try to communicate that and say, I think I was saying something along the lines of like, I don't want to do this, or I can't do this, or something, but I wasn't able to fully relay what I was feeling inside, because I was like, everything inside me was like, how do I put it? It was like bubbling up. It was like brewing
like
inside
a volcano
me.
fixing to erupt.
Yeah. And Terry had no idea, like, just how bad it was in my head. And I felt like he was pushing, like he was just trying to help, but it felt like he was pushing me back into a corner until I eventually just blew up. And I think I screamed and like collapsed to the floor and was like hyperventilating. And I said something along the lines of wanting to end my life or kill myself, something along those lines, which really freaked Terry out. And like I never had that thought of like I actually want to end my life. I just wanted out of that feeling. Like that's a feeling I had never felt before, and I hope to God I never feel it again. It was just a feeling of complete helplessness. Like I felt like I couldn't control my body.
And for me, of course, hearing those words, I don't remember exactly how it was you said it, but yeah, along the lines, if you wanted to end your life, of course, even though that wasn't what she meant, for me, I heard, I want to kill myself.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what to do. Like she was just in the floor, just an absolute mess. And I didn't know what to do. I was so scared. I was so lost. And so I just held her. I didn't know what else to do. Yeah. And I think, I don't know, after a short amount of time, I got you out of the floor, and I I think I just took you to the bedroom and you just laid you down.
Yeah.
And I didn't know, like, I think I laid there and you.
I think you just held me for a while.
And I think you ended up just falling asleep.
Yeah.
But my heart was still racing. I was so scared. So much so that I took our gun out of the house and had actually taken it to work with me, and I was leaving it at work because I was afraid that I was going to come home one day and find my wife dead. Yeah. And it was probably the scariest feeling I've ever had in my life. But I remember that afternoon after you had fallen asleep, I just went out to the church, the property that the church owns, and I just walked around the property just praying to God because I didn't know what else to do.
Yeah.
And I think that was when I was like, you need to go to counseling.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, we can't afford it. It doesn't work. I'm going to figure out some other way. I was like, you're going to go to counseling.
Yeah.
And it got harder. It got way harder.
Yeah. And I think it got harder because I had made that decision to say, I'm going to put it all out there. Like, I'm not going to hold anything in. And because of that, it got a lot harder. And, we were digging into everything that Terry did, and I didn't realize how much it was still affecting me. And, the first few weeks weren't as bad, but like the more we got into it, the harder it got. Mm-hmm. And it just like, I wasn't feeling any better. Yeah. And I started feeling like this is just going to be my life. Like, I'm not going to get any better. And like I'm getting emotional thinking about it because I think of like everything that God has done since then. Like just the start of that counseling to the end of that counseling, which was a fairly short amount of time. It was just a few months of counseling. And I remember after my last counseling session, which I don't think I even knew it was going to be my last counseling session. And, I always tried to talk to Terry about my sessions. I think there was maybe a couple times where I just told him, I wasn't up for it.
Yeah.
And
which I think the first few times you did, we talked, but there were, like you said, there wasn't a lot of progress there. There wasn't a lot happening. But then the few times they showed me that you didn't want to talk, it was very frustrating for me. Mm-hmm. And I think that it was frustrating for me because in all the times that I had gone to counseling, even if I was like, I can't tonight, but let's talk about it tomorrow, there was always some type of conversation.
And I think it's because your counseling didn't have anything to do with things that I had done.
Yeah. It was difficult, and I would come home emotionally drained and physically tired, but it was not in relevance to you.
Yeah. And so I think it was after my last counseling session, and I was just feeling super defeated, and I was talking to Terry about it, and I had asked him, I said, so what happens if I just don't get better? Because I was feeling like I was just getting worse. And
I think we had some arguments.
Oh yeah.
After some of your counseling sessions as well.
And so I asked him that, and he said, I don't know. And because I was feeling like, our marriage wasn't going to survive. And granted, this was just last year. This was just last year, 2022. It was in like March, April sometime.
Yeah, it was the spring of last year.
And because I don't think you had gone to Trace Diaz yet.
I hadn't yet, but I had been feeling for probably 6 months that I was just like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Like I had been having conversations with a very good friend of mine, Billy Lovell, and I was like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Man, that gets me emotional because I remember having so many conversations with him of just like, bro, I don't know what else to do.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if we're going to make it.
Yeah.
And I just remember him telling me, he's like, man, I'm sorry. I don't know what else to do. Just tell you to keep going, keep fighting, to keep praying, just keep pushing.
Well, and I'm super thankful that you had someone in your life to tell you to keep pushing instead of someone to tell you to give up.
Yeah.
Because that made the difference, because had you had the wrong kind of people in your life telling you, man, you don't need that, man, just leave her. Yeah. Like, you're better than that. You deserve more than that, or whatever. Like, the people you surround yourself with greatly matter.
Absolutely.
Because had you had the wrong voice speaking into you at that time, we might not be together right now.
Exactly.
You know, because it's very easy to let outside voices influence you. And so whenever Terry had told me that, you know, he didn't know, like, he didn't know what was going to happen if I didn't get better. Like, I remember in that moment just feeling completely defeated. I felt like, you know, that was a rock bottom.
Yeah.
You know, after so many years having, you know, 9 years. Yeah, 9 years.
Well, and I'd always said, no matter what, that I was never going to go anywhere.
Yeah.
Because you had always said that, well, what always stuck out in my head was the day that you told me, I can't promise you anything, but I'll try.
Mm-hmm.
And you always did. You always fought. And so that was always my response to you was, you stuck with me through everything, and you said you would try, so I am not going anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
But I think just like you, I was at the end of my rope.
Yeah.
Like, I had been trying to hold on for so long that I couldn't hold on anymore.
Well, and I think we were both feeling like it had been almost 9 years since Your Affairs come out. By this point, like, what, we should not still be here.
Yeah.
And I think we were both just done with dealing with it,
Yeah.
you know, really. But I think that, like, I look back on that time and I think that was the exact position that I needed to be in to finally allow God to come in and work.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have, like, I wasn't allowing him to come in. Like, I was trying to do it myself.
Yeah.
Like, I've always struggled with control issues, wanting to, you know, control everything around me. And so allowing God to come in and just take over, it wasn't really in my mind to even allow that, because then that meant I didn't have control.
Exactly.
And but going through counseling, it put me in this rock bottom place of having no other choice but to rely on him.
It was breaking down all your walls.
Yeah.
Is what it was doing.
And so I didn't have a choice but to say, okay,
yeah.
here, God, like, I need your help.
Yeah.
And
well, and like you said, I went to Tres Dias in the spring.
mm-hmm.
And of course you went to Tres Dias in the fall.
Yeah.
And that was really, the spring of last year was really where we finally allowed God to come in and start doing what he had been wanting to do for those last 9 years.
Yeah. Well, and I'm super excited to get into that part, but that will have to be for our next episode.
Yeah.
Because I think we're about out of time on this one. And I'm really excited to talk about the next part, because
I am too. There's so much. It blows my mind how much God has done.
Yeah.
In the last year and a half.
Yeah.
And to what's to come.
Yeah. Like, there's a song, which I'm going to blank on the name because I'm horrible with song names, but it's talking about how God made a way where there was no way. And I, like, almost every time I sing that song, I get emotional, because I think back to this time last year where God literally made a way. And see, I'm not even singing it. Where God literally made a way in my heart where there was no way. Like, I didn't see a way out of the dark place that I was in. I didn't see a way into any kind of light. I didn't see a way into not being a miserable, irritable, angry person that just kind of hated life. Like, there was no way out of that. But God made a way.
Yep.
And so that song, talking about God made a way where there was no way, like, I can't sing that without getting emotional, because I literally watched it play out in my life. So yeah, we'll start our next episode and
it'll definitely be on a positive note and a higher note. So all right, y'all. Well,
appreciate you guys hanging in there.
Yeah, and make sure you tune in next week. Talk to you later.
See you later.
Bye.